We covered the Tiger Shark yesterday, and now it's time to have a look at the rest of the pasta developers for Aviation. The reason why I singled out the Tiger Shark is because it has a really interesting story by itself, whereas all of the other ones, they're much more, I suppose, simple in regards to what happened to them. So that's why we're going to do a single video looking at all of them. The first one is the British B-17, or the Boeing Fortress bomber, which is just a British, as I said, B-17. The British used a lot of American vehicles during the war, when it came to aviation, when it came to ground vehicles, when it came to pretty much everything. The Americans really helped them quite a lot, and they normally have specific names to them. So stuff like the B-26 was known in British service as the Marauder, obviously the Boston, and vehicles like that. But basically, the Boeing Fortress, or the B-17, was designed in the late 30s for the United States Army Air Corps. It was a 4-engined heavy bomber that could carry up to 7,800 kilos of bombs in its racks. It had a crew of 10, a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, 2 waist gunners, a ball turret gunner, and also a single tail gunner. The British Royal Air Force entered the Second World War without a heavy bomber in service on the size and scale of the B-17, and in early 1940, the RAF and US Army Air Corps entered into an agreement that gave the Royal Air Force 20 B-17C bombers, which were given the service name Fortress 1, and then the B-17F and G were also adopted as the Fortress 2 and Fortress 3, respectively. Obviously, as the war went on, when it came to Britain, they did build a bunch of 4-engine bombers, which did incredibly well. The Halifax and the Lancaster, and then I suppose the Lincoln in post-war, which are examples that we have in the game. When it comes to the differences between the Fortress 1, 2, and 3, the main one is the engines are different on them, and also the armaments that they have access to. Each vehicle gets more and more bomb load and also different armament options when it comes to what's available. The Fortress 2 would have 11 50 cals and 1 30 cal machine gun, where the Fortress 3 would have 12 or 13 50 cals on the vehicle itself. So it's very similar to the progression of the American B-17s, but they would just be in service with the RAF, therefore in the British tech tree. The Japanese get a ridiculous machine, which I don't think should ever come to War Thunder. This is the P-1 Maritime Patrol Aircraft, and basically, since the 1980s, the JMSDF operated about 100 P-3C Orions for anti-submarine patrol aircraft purposes, but they were aging, and the JMSDF needed a new MPA aircraft. And at first, they wanted to adopt the MPA that was based off the Boeing 767 or the P-8 Poseidon, but JDA wanted to adopt MPA aircraft that were made in Japan itself. And in 2001, the Technical Research and Development Institute looked into building certain things, and finally Kawasaki got a agreement to start the design for a CX and PX, as they were known. In the project, Mitsubishi, Fuji, Shin Meiwa, Nippon, Showa, and Jamco also joined into the creation, and the first prototype was planned to roll out in March of 2007, but unfortunately the rivets delayed it until July. The first flight of the prototype was on the 28th of September 2007 at Gifu Air Base and were delivered in the 29th of August 2007, just a little bit before. There is a planned idea to deploy 70 of these P-1 vehicles. At the moment, there are 30 to 40 deployed and used by the Air Development Squadron 51 and Air Patrol Squadron 3 of the Fleet Air Wing 4. So these are in service today, and basically what you have here is a vehicle which has 4 turbofan engines. It can go a maximum speed of 996 kilometers an hour, and it has no guns on it. And when it comes to its armament, it can either carry 3 types of guided torpedoes, depth charges, or air-to-surface missiles, including Mavericks, Harpoons, or Type 91s. It can also carry 38 Sonoboys, I'm not sure what they are. It has 8 hardpoints on the main wing, and it has a bomb bay, but unfortunately, we don't know the capacity of it. So this would be a slow, lumbering machine that would either get annihilated or it would get off a bunch of Mavericks. That's pretty much what you would have. Something that would be impossible to balance, but hey-ho, let's add it to the Japanese tree for giggles. The next one is a Chinese trainer, the Shenyang JJ-1. Basically, this is a subsonic mid-level jet trainer developed by China's Shenyang aircraft factory in the 1950s. The indigenous aircraft is the first aircraft designed and manufactured by the People's Republic of China, and the first jet aircraft, thus occupying an important position in the history of Chinese aviation. It started its life on the 2nd of August 1956 when it was approved by the Aviation Industry Bureau. Shenyang's first aircraft design studio, Shenyang Aircraft Design Studio, was established in itself. The chief designer was Zhu Yuxiu, and the deputy directors were Huang Ziquan and Ye Zhengda. The Shenyang Aircraft Design Office was established to learn the Soviet aircraft design method, enabling the Chinese aviation industry to transition from imitation to self-design, satisfying the Air Force's demand for aircraft and cultivating its own aircraft design team. The design principle of the new jet trainer determined by the design team was that the structural strength and safety of the aircraft should meet the flight and training requirements of the trainer. The tactical performance should be close to the advanced level of similar aircraft in the world. The manufacturing, usage, and maintenance should be simple. Materials, parts, and accessories should be domestic. And the new trainer used the names of Dongfeng 101 and Red Special 503. Finally, it was reported to the Air Force and the Aviation Industry Bureau for approval. The new jet trainer was named JJ-1, also known as plane number 101. In October of 1956, the new jet trainer officially began design. In November, several preliminary plans were designed. At the end of December, the aircraft's 3-sided view and overall layout and weight and center of gravity performance were estimated. The design plan was reported to the Air Force and the second aircraft in February 1957. The Air Force and the second aircraft division approved the plan after partially modifying the design. The aircraft design studio began to teach the technical design, or began to put together the technical design, on the 1st of March 1957. The design data was sent to the Soviet Union for consultation and wind tunnel testing, and the design materials and wooden prototypes were completed in September. And from the end of 1957 to March of 1958, the drawing and mapping of drawings were also completed, and in April 1958, with the approval of the Military Products Stereotype Committee, the prototype test of the JJ-1 aircraft officially began. And on the 24th of July 1958, the first prototype 101, the Martyrdom 1, completed the final assembly, and it took less than 100 days from the completion of the production drawing to its first prototype. Following the approval of the establishment of the Shenyang Aircraft Design Studio, the Dawn Engine Design Room was established in October 1956. Wu Daguan was the director of the design office, and Yu Shuguang was the deputy director and chief designer. In order to cooperate with the development of the JJ-1 aircraft, it was determined that the first self-designed jet engine would be known as the Penfa 1A engine, codenamed PF-1A. In order to reduce the technical risk, the Dawn Engine Design Office decided to use the Turbojet 5 engine that was just copied successfully as the original engine, and used the similar law method to reduce the design. In May of 1958, the Dawn engine manufacturer made the first engine and passed the 20-hour test. On the 1st of July 1958, the first PF-1A engine was sent to the Shenyang aircraft factory for the JJ-1. And on the 26th of July 1958, Yu Zhengwu, then the head of the Air Force Training Department, completed the first flight of the second JJ-1 in the case of the first unfortunate wreckage of the JJ-1. It marks the first step in the successful design and development of aircraft in China. In October of 1958, the JJ-1 had completed flight tests for some subjects below 3,000 meters, and after the National Day of 1958, 2 JJ-1s performed flight performances in Beijing. According to the analysis of the test flight results, the design and manufacture of the aircraft was successful. When 2 JJ-1s flew back to Shenyang in mid-November, one of the engines failed, and the blades broke. Only 3 of this model were produced. 1 was used for static tests, and 2 were sealed after test flight, where 1 is in a collection in the Chinese Aviation Museum. So, this vehicle could definitely be in the game. It would only have an armament of 123mm though, so that would be a little bit rough. It would be kind of similar to the Yak-15P, is probably the closest thing in game when it comes to performance and when it comes to armament. The next vehicle is a Brazilian and Italian hybrid, the AMX-11B International. This vehicle actually came about between a joint cooperation between Alenia Aermacchi of Italy and Embraer of Brazil. The project was born out of the need to find a suitable replacement for the G91Y and take its place in the ground attacker role, due to the fact that the G91Y was slowly but surely getting outdated and could no longer be reliable enough to warrant its staying in service for that particular role. Italy also wanted an advanced multi-role platform with the addition of reconnaissance capabilities. Brazil had also joined primarily to also replace an Italian aircraft they had in service, which was the Aermacchi MB326, which for the modern war setting it wasn't really adapted for. After a few years of development, some setbacks in the form of incidents, and finally the prototypes being tested, the AMX-11 would officially be put into service inside of Italy in 1989. One of the main advantages of the AMX-11 would be that as a fighter and attack aircraft, the AMX features much lower costs than its competitors. The vehicle itself had access to some pretty crazy weaponry as well, since it is much more of a modern vehicle. It can carry stuff such as the AIM-9L Sidewinders, the Magics that you'll know, the Piranhas as well, which have been talked about in the past. It can also carry stuff such as Mavericks, anti-ship missiles as well, AS-30Ls, which I believe we already have in the game. It also can carry guided bombs or dumb bombs, JDAMs also if it feels like it, and also has an armament of a 20mm Vulcan cannon, which everybody is used to. So it can carry pretty much any piece of weaponry that you can think of in the modern era, and also has access to some pretty gnarly equipment past that as well. For France, we have another maritime patrol aircraft in the form of the Dassault Breguet 1150 Atlantique. This thing is huge. It's a big hunky chunky, and it basically comes from 1956, because in 1956 NATO believed that the American Lockheed P-2 Neptune was becoming increasingly outclassed and needed to be replaced by a superior long-range maritime and anti-submarine warplane. So they set out a request for a replacement. Breguet caught wind of this request and set to work right away, creating a design from scratch rather than using an established civil or commercial design. It became a twin-engined, mid-winged monoplane with a double-bubble fuselage, the upper lobe comprising of a pressurized crew compartment, and the unpressurized lower lobe housing a 9-meter long weapons bay, with sonobuoy tubes aft of the weapons bay. A radar scanner is housed in a retractable under-fuselage ray dome, while a magnetic anomaly detector is housed in a tail boom and was to be powered by a pair of Rolls-Royce Tyne RTY.20 Mark 21 turboprop engines, making 5,500 to 6,100 horsepower each. After submitting the design, NATO stipulated that among the 24 other designs that were submitted, the BR-1150 was the most capable and ordered the production to begin. After completing 2 prototypes from 1961-62 and pre-production aircraft being made in 63, the French and German navies started to place orders for the aircraft, which would start being delivered in 1965, followed by the Netherlands and Italy receiving theirs in 71 and 72. In 1978, the French government requested for an advanced version of the Atlantique titled the Atlantique Nouvelle Génération, which just means the Atlantic New Generation. And as Breguet became merged into Dassault, Dassault took over production and started working on the new design. While the fuselage and exterior of the aircraft remained similar, the interior, avionics, and equipment were upgraded drastically. The upgrades include a new radar and the addition of FLIR underneath the nose, along with the ability to carry AIM-39 Exocet missiles in dual or quad mounts. Both the upgraded versions of the original Atlantique, along with the Atlantique II, could be mounted with hardpoints for a theoretical additional 2,500 kilos of bombs or anti-ship missiles, although this has not been on any aircraft to date. So this thing can carry bombs, torpedoes, or missiles, and the missiles are specifically anti-ship. But, as I said, it can carry a bunch of different bombs. It could technically carry mines, depth charges, and all of those machines or stuff like that. So its use in game would be kind of interesting because it could only go 648 kilometers an hour, but it could have anti-ship missiles. So we'll have to see if this ever fits in. The Swedish get a plane of American origin, the J-10 Vultee Vanguard 48C. Basically, the Swedish J-10, or as an American designation, the Vultee Vanguard 48C, which would eventually become the P-66 later on, which we already have in game, is a fighter aircraft which served in the US Air Force, the British Royal Air Force, and also the Chinese Nationalist Air Force. However, the fighter aircraft was originally supposed to be in Swedish use. In the early months of 1940, the Flygvapnet placed an order for 144 Vanguard fighter aircraft of the 48C variant, which in turn the Flygvapnet designated the aircraft as the J-10. The prior J-10, they also placed an order for around 120 P-35 Seversky fighters, which were designated as the J-9 throughout 1939. The Model 48C, which Sweden were intending to purchase, had an export version of the Pratt & Whitney R1830-33 engine with 1,200 horsepower during takeoff and around 1,050 at 13,000 feet. The armament was 2 50 caliber machine guns at the propeller arch and 4 30 caliber machine guns in the wings. However, the Flygvapnet were planning on refitting the J-10s with a new armament, which would have been 2 8mm KSP M22s and 2 13.2mm Akan M39s in the propeller arch, but this obviously didn't happen. Before any of the J-10s could be delivered to the Swedish Air Force, the US government placed an embargo on exporting military aircrafts to Sweden, which, along with the J-10 Vanguard, the rest of the J-9 Severskys, which were left to be developed to Sweden, were also halted. The reason for this was due to the increased fears of the German regime at the time and their ever-growing occupation in Europe, which the US government feared the fighter aircraft Sweden bought and were sent to were in risk of being captured or confiscated by the Axis power. After the embargo on Sweden, the J-10s were subsequently sent to the British Royal Air Force, a part of the Lend-Lease program as Vanguard 1s. However, the RAF considered the aircraft to be unsuitable for combat purposes and were more suited as a training aircraft for pilots based in Canada. And also, before they went into service as training aircraft in Canada, the fighter aircrafts were hastily sent off to the Chinese Nationalist Air Force in 1941 as the P-66 Vanguard. The US government also sent the P-66 Vanguards to the Nationalist China in 1942. They were used as an emergency defense aircraft in the 14th Pursuit Group at southern parts of California as well, in the anticipation, there we go, there's the word, of a Japanese attack on the mainland US prior for its shipping to China. Now, obviously, this aircraft never got to Sweden. It also never got its actual armament for the Swedish, which would have obviously been the 13.2s and the 8mm. But the idea is, since Sweden wanted to buy these and were scheduled to, maybe they could be put into the Swedish tree, but maybe with the American armament. The IAI-201 Arava is also being passed for Israel. Now, we already talked about this machine last time, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. It was already passed in the form of a post for a earlier rank Israeli aircraft, part of the tech tree, which looked absolutely terrible. But basically what this machine is one of the first domestically produced Israeli aircraft, and basically it was unarmed when it came to the Israelis, but a bunch of other nations did try and arm them up. They added stuff such as rockets to them and also some guns as well. So basically this would have two forward-facing 12.7mm Browning machine guns, and then 2 rocket pods for 6 rockets, but it's not confirmed which rockets they would be. And also, you could have 2 LAU-68 rocket pods with 7 rockets each in Mexican use, and also you could have a rear-facing gun of either 7.62mm or 12.7mm in the back tail cone. So this is a vehicle which could have definitely, been in the Israeli tech tree. Maybe it will be in the future, maybe some kind of premium, but my god, it would be a little bit rough to use. Anyway, that is all of the vehicles passed to the devs for February of 2022 in aviation. Hope you all had a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Merciless Reaper, Jerry Provolt, Mega Dino King, Professor X1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, Moxie, B. Young, and Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.